Thank you again for this opportunity to say a few remarks here. My name is Bernard Orlandum. I'm the Vice Provost for Research here at Tufts University and a professor within the School of Medicine. So on behalf of the Tufts University leadership here, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this convening and to thank each of you for making the trip down to our Medford and Somerville campus. Tufts has been a strong proponent of the environment and has been supportive of the MOCEAN initiative since its conception and since its beginning. Many of you here in the room joined us last May for the previous MOCEAN convenings, and some participated in last year's Council for Competitiveness, which was actually held in this room, where we hosted a conversation regionally here at Tufts, where we would examine how New England could strengthen its leadership around the blue and green economy, which is essentially a tenet of Massachusetts and the Commonwealth. I believe that the conversations that you all already are having and will be having for the next couple of days here are vital and importantly timely, given where we are in our current administration, to really sort of stress the future health of our oceans and our energy security, which is obviously very important to the current administration, but all U.S. administrations, and also to strengthen the economic development of communities across our region. So at Tufts, we are again, through our many schools, are very proud to contribute to this collaborative partnership. And research that really bridges different schools is something that I cherish, but it also is cherished by the leadership here. So we have Dan, I see Eric here from the School of Engineering. Who else is here from A&S? Randy, are you here? Randy's back there from A&S. And then our Tisch College of Civic Life. So hopefully that sends a signal, right? This is a very collaborative network, and we really want to think about that space between schools and really foster collaborative research. We are honored that you continue to put your trust in Tufts leadership of the MOCEAN initiative, while we recognize that many of you actually are currently leading large initiatives with overlapping and adjacent missions at your respective schools. So again, in closing, just wanted to encourage you to take full advantage of Tufts the next 2 days, engage deeply, ask those difficult and often challenging questions, and think collectively about what success looks like, not only for this initiative, but for the broader ecosystems and communities we serve. So thank you again for being here and look forward to the outcome of this convening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernard. We've been very well supported by our university through this initiative, as he mentioned, for several years. So sincerely appreciate that. What we're going to do in the next 20 minutes is, first of all, my name's Dan Kuchma. I'm a professor in civil and environmental engineering at Tufts University. I'm also the PI of this NSF project we have on nature inclusive design for offshore infrastructure. Not all of you were at the convening last year or have been involved in MOCEAN. So we're going to take a little bit of time just to say, hey, what is nature inclusive design? What is MOCEAN? Then we'll go through the agenda and how we're hoping to have you engaged, because we're hoping to learn a lot from this event over the next day and a half or so. And then Farah is going to go through the goal, objectives, and principles associated with what we're doing. So let me start by stating what is like sort of the obvious observation. We put stuff in the water, such as the 6,000 oil and gas platforms in the Gulf of Mexico. You get marine growth and habitat attraction. Similarly, if you're doing in concrete gravity-based structures for wind turbines in Belgium, you get the same type of thing. There's a different growth. It's going to be different for the particular habitat. So we put stuff in the water, and if we do, we know things will grow. So what is nature inclusive design? Nature inclusive design is, yes, we're going to be putting stuff in the water, but hey, let's do it with some intent in terms of we're trying to achieve certain outcomes, avoid other types of outcomes. And so we're looking at what types of materials, surface textures, coatings, and geometries are going to achieve the results we want for the different environmental conditions that we are in. And so there has been tremendous progress in this space, and I think increased confidence that we don't know how to do it in all environments, but it's something that is our achievable objectives. You put a couple of these things together and then people start to think, well, where are the opportunities for doing this? And of course, and how should we be thinking about nature inclusive design? And well, we could be thinking of it for essentially everything. And so this is a wonderful report that was produced about 10 years ago, talking about how we would do this so that what we're doing in offshore wind farms, that they really function as turbine reefs. The same is true for seawalls, piers, breakwaters, et cetera. So essentially it applies to anything we're doing in the marine environment is an opportunity. When we met at the convening, and there's going to be a little bit of discussion and research, but last time when we met, there was a lot of presentations on different projects that are out there. As a little bit of background, I just wanted to mention, hey, what do research projects look like where people are trying to advance nature inclusive design? So I'll just show a couple of examples. One example is a project we're doing with support from Mass Clean Energy Center, Orsted and Boskalis, in which we are looking at making concretes with nutrients infused paints that are going in labs and in the field environment to see what types of marine growths and habitats are attracted. Another project that was completed by some of our friends down in Florida, and this is actually how I got involved in nature and inclusive design. Think of this mundane engineering decision when you're looking at monopiles and you're thinking about venting them and about how you're going to paint them on the inside. Those quote unquote engineering decisions that you're making in these chambers that can be 10 meters in diameter, right, and sticking in 50 meters of water are actually greatly influential in terms of what types of habitats you're going to create and support. Another example is, and this is a wind farm in Denmark, a project by Orsted, in which you see what they've done is they're doing something to the wind turbine itself, but within the wind farm, they're actually employing these structures and seeing with intent, with design, and they're seeing what happens. And as you imagine in all of these projects, you have to establish baseline conditions, do extensive monitoring, you learn from that, then you can deploy at larger scale. We could potentially look at this in a positive light as reforestation like we do on land, but it's a lot more complicated in the ocean environment. It's a lot more sensitive. When you take that and you start to think broadly at the scale of a wind farm, and all those dots you see in this figure are wind turbines. Overseas, across the pond, they are actually starting to think about if there was an opportunity for offshore wind, it shouldn't just be about generating energy, it should be about energy, nature, and food. So this whole idea of multi-use has become very significant. And one of the things that supports that multi-use is when, for example, in the case of offshore wind, when they're looking at bids from developers, when they're making that selection of project, they're actually giving substantial weighting to something called non-price criteria. Not how many cents per kilowatt hour are you going to supply the electricity, but what is the effect on the ecology? And when the Netherlands started doing this in 2022, they put 50% of the merit review points on the effect of the ecology. Across Europe, the general thought is it should probably be about 30% for non-price criteria, and guidelines, standards, et cetera, are being developed to support this. So there's initiatives in the US, but there's even larger initiatives, and I think great examples to follow overseas, and you're going to learn about some of those. With respect to the background to MOCEAN, I wanted to comment about how it came into being, what it is and what it isn't, because I don't want to pretend we're overreaching. So, prior to 2021, before I had thought of anything related to ocean nature inclusive design, of course, there was a large number of organizations caring about the ocean and considering what the impact of offshore wind was going to be on the environment. And I started working on engineering projects in about 2021, in which we were looking at engineering decisions, but we were starting to say, hey, how is this going to be? How are these decisions impacting the marine ecosystem? And we had this workshop, which really changed my perspective on things. And it was on supporting marine ecosystems through nature inclusive design. And we had more than 100 people participate, speakers from all around the world. And I finally learned I have to stop using the expression biofouling. that growth is a bad thing. That growth is actually a really, really good thing. And we got to figure out how to do it in an effective way. So this led a bunch of us to get together. There was about 20 organizations, and we made it as far as being a semi-finalist for this large $160 million NSF Regional Innovation Engine. Ultimately, we were not successful. They gave us a $1 million consolation prize. And so what we've been doing in the last 2.5 years, and this convening is supported by those consolation prize monies, and that project winds up this August. So we had a convening last summer, last May on this, and we're thrilled with how it goes, and we're so pleased that you're here with us today to have another convening. This convening here probably is a little bit more purposeful in intent, and Farah is going to talk about what we want to try to achieve from this. I wanted to mention what sort of an innovation ecosystem is, to sort of say, how do I think about what MOCEAN is? And so I really like this drawing because what it conveys is this idea of multi-hubs. And so MOCEAN's not trying to be, I think, anything that's overarching, that is somehow everybody's like working, like underneath anybody else's umbrella. There are many other much larger organizations that have been doing a lot of work in the ocean space. We actually tried to make a map, or my student John tried to make a map of the innovation ecosystem. And like he was trying to play with like 60 objects. And then he had like this biggest plate of spaghetti you've ever seen in your life. And then we gave up on the ability to do this. And so if you can imagine all the people who are involved in the oceans and development, and who care about the oceans, is very complex. And so I think it's fantastic that it's really a multi-hub type view, where different sizes of hubs engaging sometimes with overlapping and sometimes separate communities. So that's where I sort of see MOCEAN is one of these who is trying to do, like many others are, responsible development and of the oceans, and trying to create new opportunities for communities. So we have this 2-day agenda. So we have 5 panels. They vary in character quite a bit in terms of how much is presentation, how much is directly going into discussion. We have a couple breakouts that are happening later on this afternoon. We have a wonderful networking reception and fireside chat, which I think is going to be extremely memorable. And then another thing that we have towards the end of the day tomorrow is something called a open space. And my first major experience with open space was when we did this convening last year. And this is a picture of what open space looks like. You probably recognize the carpet. It's the same space. And so what will be happening at 2 p.m. tomorrow is everybody's going to be gathering on the other side of that wall. And then individuals, as on the top right here, are going to come and say, hey, I would love to have a conversation about the following topic. And then they are assigned a ring with an easel and a flip chart. And then people have a conversation, and then we regroup. So when in reviews of the event last time, many people commented they thought the open space discussion was one of the best elements of the workshop. In terms of ways that we hope to engage with you all, one of the ways is next door. There are sitting 4 phones on high tables, a question by each of them, and you can just pick up the phone and respond to the question. You don't have to say who you are. That's completely optional. And we would love to have your input, because this is going to be very helpful to us as we're trying to figure out, what people think is important and looking forward towards the future. Kayla is also available. Kayla, where are you? Oh, there she is, to do interviews. And there's a sign-up sheet on the desk, which has been updated with some time. So you can also directly interact with Kayla and provide information. She's helping to create a storyboard for the event. For the younger people in the crowd, just in case it wasn't clear, that blue thing, that's a telephone. And so, like, if you've never held a telephone, like, you should just like go and grab it. It has a really good feel for it. And for those of us who are a little bit older and you were going to reminisce a little bit, like, so an incentive for doing it. Another thing, and many of you may have seen it, I saw a number of you over there, we have an art display. And we will be having the artist who drew a number of the drawings that you see over there, Cameron Barker, with us at this event. But there's some exquisite drawings. and this idea of how do you use art to sort of define common goals. And it's been our experience that when you bring people together and you say, hey, what do you want for the oceans? You can actually have a very large level of agreement if you start with thinking and visualizing what you want to achieve. Another thing that is over there is a book, and Cam, the same artist, is creating a lot of images for that book. And it's a girl born of the sea, and it's a powerful story. I hope you have the opportunity to look through the book and the text and the drawings that are under development. We also have Kate Weatherall, who has produced some sculptures that you also see out there in the same location. So I encourage you to go over there and engage with the artists and authors and provide them your feedback on what you are seeing. On the tables, you will notice that there is a QR code. And what's on your mind? Anything, anytime, if you got a thought, just go there, put what's in your thought, and you don't have to say who you are. That's completely optional, but we greatly value your input. We had a day zero for this event, so we had a number of graduate students that came from across the region, and they put together some of their ideas for what are elements of a nature inclusive design. And you see some of their ideas posted on a wall in that center area. And then on one of the tall tables, you see a lot of other yellow papers and markers. Draw your own visions for what you think are elements. And if you want to make it a chemical formula too, that's cool as well. So please present your ideas for us. And so at this point, I'll turn it over to Farah.
Hi, everybody. It's so great to be here in person with many of you who joined us last year and have been working with us over the last couple of years, and also many new faces of people we've just been engaging with and starting to learn about how their initiatives might fit into what we're doing. So I really encourage you to look for unfamiliar faces, meet each other. You never know where new important partnerships may form. So why are we here? You've seen on the agenda and elsewhere, and now up on the screen, our goal. As our final product for our NSF grant, we have to produce some recommendations, a roadmap, a framework, titled really to be determined, but really it's an action plan for moving forward on the priorities that we've identified during this time that need to be addressed, the questions, the research, the challenges, the organizing that has to happen to achieve the goal of incorporating, transforming our development system of offshore wind and offshore infrastructure to have nature inclusive design as a core component. So our objectives are pretty simple. We want to get everybody together. We want to talk a little bit about the things we've been thinking about, how we're approaching this, and we want your feedback. This is really based on what we've been hearing from you. So let us know that we got it right. Let us know where we got it wrong. If your thoughts have changed, refinements, other organizations or people that should be involved, and other efforts that we can leverage to bring to the table to try to advance these questions. This is all about alliances and collaboration. So we see our work as connecting the dots between all the work that you're doing and creating synergies and the opportunity to leverage all those resources. So we've tried to capture what we're thinking in a series of principles. So don't get too hung up on the individual words and the wordsmithing. They're concepts. We want your feedback on them. Again, does the framing that we have capture where you think we need to go? Think about refinements, questions, and specific initiatives or actions that can advance these principles and how they relate. Think about them as you're hearing the presentations and the discussion today too, and see if we're drawing the parallels in the right directions. So the first one is integrated ecosystem valuation. And that's basically taking a broad view of what we mean by nature inclusive design. It includes humans. When we talk about ecosystems, very often we sort of box out the human community and we think only about the other biological features. And it's essential that we bring these together. So we're talking about important human uses, human values, and human communities when we're talking about ecosystem services that we want to promote. So it's really multidisciplinary research that's going to support this and the decision-making behind this, that's going to be looking at a variety of scales, from the micro scale of the engineering marine interface to the macro scale of how all these things are interacting in the marine environment together and how they're interacting with communities. Second, it's all about collaboration and, importantly, creating a learning environment. And I think this is really one of the really key issues here. We collect a lot of data. We're all about data, especially in the era of offshore wind. Offshore wind has driven so much exploration of the marine environment. It's triggered innovation in technologies and analytics. We have many tools in place, but we aren't really using that data to its full potential. We need to learn to get outside the individual project framework or the individual state framework and think bigger and really think on ecosystem scale and think about efficiency, standardization, and really what we need to do to drive things forward. And we need to think about how we appropriately share risk when we're trying new things, because we have to do things to learn things. So those are all questions that are important, and we're hoping that our roadmap can try and advance us towards some solutions there. Third, it's all about science. It's about science and engineering and research and a significant amount of technical discussion and decision-making and discovery and innovation. But we also have to bring innovation to the system we use to manage all this stuff. We need to be thinking about how our policy and regulation works and where it doesn't actually drive the things we want to see happen. And, you know, we're in a moment now in this country. It's a very interesting moment. And a lot of our, at the federal level, a lot of our assumptions about how regulatory programs work are being challenged or tossed and boxes that we've been stuck in for a couple of decades that we've used to manage our systems, but also that have constrained our innovation within the policy and regulatory context. Those boxes are kind of being broken. So we have it's kind of like we're ending a chapter of offshore wind development, but also of how we think about regulation. There will come a time when we have to reinvent it. And so let's build it back better. Let's use this time that I like to refer to as the great pause as an opportunity to think about the things we wish we could have done in the before times and figure out how to do them and start developing those frameworks and be ready to really write the next chapter that we want to write. And fourth, Dan mentioned this, there is so much work going on. There are resources, there's data, there's organizations, there's initiatives. And we're not starting something brand new talking about nature inclusive design. It's really a new way of thinking about development. It's a way of putting nature first and in the beginning stage, and of thinking about how projects are designed and how we want to manage them over time. And it's moving away from the concept of focusing solely on what is the impact of this new infrastructure on the marine environment as it exists right now, but thinking more dynamically in terms of what are the interactions, what are the possible positive results of this new development, and how can we optimize those positive benefits? Because infrastructure is something that we need to do. And that's about offshore wind. We need offshore wind, I believe, still, and we will get back to building it to address the energy transition and climate change in this region. We are going to need to build lots of seawalls and or other kinds of structures to control rising seas from warming temperatures. We have oil and gas development happening. We will be probably seeing more of that. We'll also be seeing the decommissioning of oil and gas. So how can we think about all those things, starting from the point of what's actually happening, what are the interactions, and how can we maximize the benefits? So it's a shift in thinking that I think really captures what we're trying to do overall. So as we're talking from a variety of different perspectives this morning, keep those principles in mind as you're listening to the talks. Keep referring back to them if you can. As I said, nothing's locked in stone. These are ideas, and we want you to challenge them, support them, refine them. We need to be hearing from you. So finally, as we're discussing, you see on your tables this information, but just to repeat, we're operating under Chatham House rules. These are interesting times, and we want people to not feel constrained by being associated with new ideas that they may be presenting that might not be comfortable to share their association with publicly. So we will be providing summaries of what's happening here and different kinds of products, but we will not be talking about attributing particular comments to particular people without your permission, explicit permission to do so. And we ask that everyone in the room follow that rule as well. Talk about the ideas, talk about the debates, but keep the individual people out of it, just so that everybody can feel comfortable here expressing themselves in comfort. We were looking for innovation. It had to happen. It was an important industry. Many of us were advocating for it and trying to move it forward, and it was happening fast. And one thing we saw was that there was still public opposition, legitimate public questions about this big change we're making in the ocean environment at a very rapid pace, concerns about impacts on fisheries and impacts on the ecosystems that these installations were going to be placed in. As we said, there's pause now. That urgency around offshore wind isn't there, but the work that we've been doing is really important to keep moving forward. So over the last 18 months or so, we've been looking at other sectors of offshore infrastructure that are asking similar questions and doing similar science and similar research around how to improve the interactions between infrastructure and the marine environment. And we've been really excited to see the parallels. And we have two keynote speakers that are going to be spending some time to introduce their areas of focus and draw some parallels to what we have been doing. And I ask you to do the same and think about how we can use this this convergence of interest in this new thinking about offshore development to create a unified voice and a unified advocacy and approach that can give us the sort of strength that we need, the strength of numbers and the coherence that we need.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Are these slides going to be available afterwards, minus any new results or anything that's not published?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yes,
So
they will
stop
be.
taking pictures of
Yeah, you don't have to take pictures of every single slide. It's a very good question. Yeah. So where was I? So we're talking about the opportunities for new partnerships in other areas. And we really feel that a more expanded vision of what we're talking about in terms of offshore infrastructure, not to leave offshore wind behind, but to partner up with these other entities that are asking questions from different angles and get to know those people and that expertise is a real rich opportunity as we build our framework. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first keynote speaker, who is Dr. Henk van Rijn, the head of research impact for Hal Marine Consulting, and he's going to be giving us a view from across the pond in the UK and the work that his organization is managing and the kind of conversations that are happening around offshore infrastructure and nature inclusive design there.
Thank you, Farah. Yeah. Can you hear me there? Yeah, great. Okay. Thank you for a great introduction. Thank you also for inviting me over here. It's really exciting to be here. It's also my first time to Boston and the US. So it's a double dipper. Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. And, you know, as far as said, I'm here to share some insights from across the pond. I'm going to be talking about some offshore environmental research that I'm involved with that looks at oil and gas, looks at wind turbines, it looks at research that we've been doing over the last 10 years. Okay, so I'm going to start off by taking us to a different place. The North Sea is where a lot of this research has occurred. I'm sure you'll already know this is one of the most heavily industrialized shallow seas in the world. Famous for the North Sea oil and gas boom that began in the late 60s, but we now see it. There's an offshore wind energy boom there as well. The UK were leading this race until last year. We've now been pipped by the Chinese, so there you go. All eyes on China for this. But the North Sea does have it all. You know, we've got oil and gas, offshore wind, a lot of fishing, shipping, ports, harbors, all around those countries there. Cables, pipelines, aggregates extraction, munitions dumps, a lot of shipwrecks after the Second World War. It's even a place of recreation, you know, but I would advise you to bring your wetsuit because it's quite cold. It's an excellent place to study and learn about the effects of offshore structures, but also the societal and the economic consequences of the decisions that we make with regards to these structures. Now, I didn't start my career working in the North Sea. I actually live in Northern Ireland. So if you see that little yellow house, that's actually where I live. I started my career as a marine ecologist, specializing in benthic ecology, seabed monitoring and assessment techniques. I've always been fascinated by ecology. I think ever since I was a kid, I was the kid that collected things and put them in jars and, you know, but it's the interconnectedness of everything I do find fascinating, and I find that with people as well. So my early seabed fish monitoring experiences around the Northern Irish coast, I learned a lot about marine biodiversity over those years. Northern Ireland is at the interface between warmer and colder water as well. So we see a lot of changes happening there, regardless of human activities. In time, I took up work at a statutory nature conservation body, and I was really impressed. The lady I spoke to on the lunch break had heard of the JNCC. 10 points for you. And I worked there as a scientist and then a manager, and I promoted conservation of the marine environment, marine biodiversity. I began to wonder why more was not being done about some of the changes I was seeing in environment. You know, a lot more plastics, fewer fish, rarer mammals, habitats being degraded left, right, and center. I was reporting and communicating these things, highlighting these threats, but yet it seemed like little was actually being done about it. Like the work I was doing was not having an impact, right? So it forced me to start asking myself, were we communicating with the right people? Did those people understand anything about our work? Did our work seem to align with their values? What actually were their values? What matters to these people? So what? This is a question that quite a few of us, I'm sure, get asked by our managers. So I realized what matters to people is what shapes the agenda, and it's where the resources are directed. I rebranded myself then as a natural capitalist, not a capitalist naturally, but rather someone who thinks about natural assets, Things like species, habitats, the nutrients, the air we breathe, the water we drink, rocks, metals, all of these things are in the biosphere, but they're limited within that biosphere. And as well as that, the ecological functions, cycles, ecosystem services that endlessly recycle and maintain the condition of these assets. Now, I believe, I really do, the better we understand these concepts and the value and their value, we then increase our chances of creating management systems that will maintain what matters most, but also will align with those natural processes rather than fighting them all the time. Sometimes that might mean taking less, or it might mean only taking at a certain time, or it might mean replacing what we take over time, like planting trees, say, right? Or it could even mean intervening in the mechanics of ecosystems, stimulating the production of the things that we want, even if it means through artificial means. Now, that word artificial, I really thought about this. And if it comes from the biosphere, is it really artificial? Is it not more that we've taken a resource, we've repurposed it, and now we've put it somewhere else? It's out of place. It's maybe not artificial. Depends on what you think. So I'll come back to this. First of all, you see, I put something on your screens there, and does anyone know what this is? Any ideas, any guesses? You can shout anything out there. No right, well, there is a right answer. Well, it is a little blurry. I'm going to go ahead, right? These are cold water corals. Now, they're once widespread across the deeper waters of the northern North Sea and the Northeast Atlantic. They're slow growing, they're long lived. They create immense colonies, three-dimensional structure, complexity, and they create ecological niches that enhance local biodiversity. They create food, shelter, they give nursery areas for many invertebrates and fish species. They also sequester carbon. They provide a basket of ecosystem services. And as you can see, they're growing quite healthily on this. This is ROV inspection footage collected from an oil and gas platform. And you can see they actually look quite healthy there. Now, unfortunately, they've been in decline for many decades. This is attributed mostly to climate change and fishing effects. They are now considered a priority species for conservation. And one of the big regulatory frameworks we have across Northwest Europe is OSPAR. So OSPAR have designated these as a priority habitat, okay? Here are more cold water corals. Now, these are from a recently decommissioned oil and gas jacket in Scotland. And the corals you see here, these are ready to be scraped off into a metal skip is what we call them. I'm not sure what you call them. It's a big metal bin, basically. And then taken off to landfill and disposed of as bio-waste. Now, by default, all oil and gas platforms in the North Sea must be removed at the end of their life. This is a law that's also made by OSPAR. There are very few exceptions to this, but they're removed end of life regardless of the biodiversity that grows on them. Now, this biodiversity is considered artificial, out of place. Therefore, it can't be counted towards the conservation targets that OSPAR has set. Have we got this right? Is this the system that we want? Is this what's best for nature? Is this going to give us those ecosystem services that we want? So it's questions like these that kicked off the Insight program now 12 years ago. Insight was the first real joint industry partnership of its kind in UK marine research, and its aim has always been to provide the independent scientific evidence base to better support and understand the influence of marine artificial structures on the ecosystem of the North Sea. Now, like I said, we're going 12 years now. We're actually in our third phase, and each phase builds on the former, which is great. We've delivered 16 projects in that time. A data sharing initiative, 6 PhD projects that are nearly finished, 8 conferences. I just finished the 8th 2 weeks ago. And a synthesis project brought together 36 scientists from all over the world to discuss their views on decommissioning. And some of those scientists came from the US. Now, as my current role as head of research impact at Howell, I lead the Insight team as well as two other research impact teams for EcoWind and EcoFlow. You can see the logos and all the sponsors along the bottom of the screen there. Now, there are 6 large projects in these programs. They're all looking at understanding the environmental effects of fixed, floating wind on the seabed, the water column, food webs, fish, and seabirds. Now, across this is around 23 million pounds worth of offshore environmental research. We are responsible for delivering change from this, real world change. I don't do any of the detailed science work anymore, but I work with the stars who do. But what we try to do is we try and create more of an impact with that work itself. Success for me and my team means embedding the most relevant science into the heart of decision making and policy development so that it can inform how we manage our seas. This is maybe what I was missing back in my JNCC days. So I'm going to tell you a little bit now. Farah's asked me to give you, some insights on Insight, and there's a little too much to cover. So I've just cherry-picked a few of the findings that I think will help us in our conversations over the next couple of days. There's a QR code on the screen there. If you want to know more, our phase 2 report's quite good. It summarizes a lot of the most relevant work. I'm happy to chat to you anytime over the next couple of days. We've got 3 new projects, README, Corrode, and Valmas. README is a social attitudes project. We're trying to understand the perceptions we all have and the preconceptions actually around oil and gas, offshore wind, and shipwrecks. And then when you're more informed about those things, do you change your mind? Corrode is about pipelines. So we're looking at the materials, the pathways, the impacts of oil and gas pipeline breakdown if it's left there for tens to hundreds of years. And last, but by no means least, is Valmas, which is my pet favorite. Valmas is a large project, about 5.5 million, collaboration between the Natural Environment Research Council and Insight, and is looking to uncover the ecological and social value of marine artificial structures. It builds our understanding of the ecosystems that grow around oil and gas and wind installations, and understand where and when those ecosystem services are provided, and then give us the tools to weigh up the trade-offs in benefits and risks for decision makers concerning life cycle management and the decommissioning of these structures. So for now, right, what have we learned from 12 years of research and 50 years of oil and gas and 25 years of offshore wind? I think one of the headline messages that you probably all get is that we are creating new habitats with these structures. The structures, they quickly become vibrant hubs for marine life. They foster 3-dimensional complex communities, significant biodiversity, ecological function. Some say oases in the desert, particularly if you're dealing with soft sediment areas that are quite heavily fished. And in the North Sea, this is very much the case. They provide a lot of ecological functions, often replacing or replicating, I should say, some of the functions of natural reefs. One of those functions is fish aggregation. It's a big one. I'm sure all the nature inclusive design folk are well read up on that. Fish, crustacea, they're attracted, they aggregate to these structures. Some of the Insight research has shown elevated fish densities around structures, with a structure having a zonal influence of up to 20 kilometers, which is probably 16 miles or so. It shows they have a massive pool, basically. There was an anecdotal a pass through a wind farm where the schooling fish density was 6 times higher within the wind farm area than the surrounding 10 kilometers outside of the wind farm area. They provide a lot of other sort of ecosystem services and functions, such as connectivity, acting as stepping stones in some cases, where dispersal connectivity of native species, such as the deepwater corals, can be propagated. The flip side of that, though, is they can also spread the invasives, which is what we don't want. So that's not great. But the is it fouling communities or the new biogenic communities that are growing on them. They filter suspended matter out of the water. They contribute to organic carbon dynamics. There's carbon sequestration that happens as well. They influence the structure of the foraging habits as well of a lot of the top predators. So we've seen seals and dolphins using the pipelines as sort of underwater highways with feeding stations along the way. It goes without saying where there's often a safety exclusion zone around a lot of these structures. So fishing vessels can't get too close. And in that, there's an absence of fishing pressure. And there you have a de facto marine protected area. So there's a flip side, of course. I mentioned the spread of the non-invasives. There's also, you've got the contaminants, you've got the pollutants, such as those you see in the drill cuttings piles, persistent materials such as plastics. They're going to be a problem. And the very structure of themselves, which were formerly on sedimentary habitats, those sedimentary habitats are gone now. They're basically exchanged, turned into something else. You've also got alteration of local food webs then as a result of that. If you think specifically about wind turbines, one of the biggest effects, this is now coming out of the EcoWind program, is about the turbulent effects of the water that's flowing through and around the turbines. Our latest paper that came out just last week, in fact, showing that you could have an impact footprint of up to 8% of that benthic area could be disrupted now. And it's just because of the turbulent eddies coming off of the turbines. Also, the mid-water effect of that is that you get more mixing, and then you get less stratification in the summer, and you get more mobilization of nutrients, and you can get more production. Now, that might actually be a good thing, but we don't know about the long-term consequences of that yet. So overall, it's clear there are benefits, but those don't come without consequences too. So it's important, and I think we'll be increasingly asked to do this, and it's to weigh up the pros and the cons of these things as we go forward. So coming back to OSPAR, and all these benefits and losses, and so is any of this going to be useful for us? I believe so, but the last environmental assessment of the North Sea carried out by OSPAR, the OSPAR Quality Status Report 2023, showed that the 11 environmental descriptors failed. All of them failed. Things like biodiversity, food webs, commercial stocks, seafloor, eutrophication, contaminants, noise, litter. Specific concerns were raised around bottom trawling, where the seabed's been significantly degraded by bottom trawling over the years. Some of my former work, I saw that areas of seabed had been trawled over 6 times in 1 year, and that's every year. So there's no hope of anything actually springing back from that. 80% of fish stocks are not in good condition too. General declines in marine life. Now, perhaps these effects could be mitigated by some of the benefits of the offshore structures that we want. However, the offshore structures, they were also raised in this report as a problem, that they are removing the sedimentary habitat under the footprints of those structures. Now, the problem with this is that I think this is more an issue with the policy and the assessment method, because OSPAR don't, as we know, they don't record any of the artificial life that's growing on the structure. That doesn't make it into any of the assessments. So if it's not in your assessment system or your framework, how can you possibly include it in any of your other, your other assessing processes? Now, another way of looking at this is, I really like this figure here. I'm not sure if any of you have come across this before. It's made by the Biodiversity Stripes Info and Living Planet Index database. And what they've used is a blend of UK Meteorological Office data and vertebrate biodiversity estimates. And it shows relative changes in the world going from 1970 to 2020. So it's a 50-year period there. Along the top is the temperature. And if it's cooler, it goes from blue to warmer to red. And then along the bottom, if it's richer vertebrate biodiversity, it's green, and it moves through yellow to poor biodiversity in the gray there. So if you're born in the 50s, sorry, if you're around about in your 50s, you were born at the beginning of that scale. If like myself, you're a child of the young 80s, I'm kind of like a little bit there. That's when the changes start to creep in, and then more and more changes. And then any of our kids right now, they're born in that period where there's everything is very, very different to when we were. And now this is only a 50-year period. So we know the world is changing, right? This shows there's a twinned biodiversity and climate crisis. Now, the latter, the climate crisis, is one of the things that's driving the renewable energy transition. But could it also support the recovery of biodiversity? Can it help address our biodiversity crisis? The 2025, which is not on this scale, but it was a big year for, it was a record year for wind energy installations. Around the world, 165 gigawatts of wind was installed last year, bringing us in a total to 1.3 terawatts of wind energy across the whole world. That's enough to power all the US, by the way. So it's an enormous amount of energy being made just from the wind. Now, offshore wind is only a fraction of that. It's only 92 gigawatts, but it's still a lot though. And that is set to triple over the next 5 years. Now, in the North Sea, if development targets are met, we're eventually going to have 30 to 40,000 turbines all over the North Sea. What is the cumulative effect of all these turbines going to be? What is Ospower going to think about that? These very questions, in fact, especially how these turbines are decommissioned, is being debated by Ospower right now. They've got a consultation that's actually ongoing. Question is whether they're going to follow what the oil and gas industry have done, or whether they're going to do something new. So I thought I'd finish up here by sort of sharing where I've got to with all this. I tried really hard with AI here to capture my vision. And this is about the third or the fourth iteration. I've got a few more after this. It kept undoing things I liked. So what you've got is the balance of what I could achieve, right? I'm sure with a bit more time, I could do better. And I see a lot of the artwork out there is absolutely fantastic. So after this, I'm going to go and make my drawing in person out there, I think. But I think in pulling all this together, these are really great things. I'd love to chat more about these things over the next couple of days. So first of all, I mean, what could this look like? Well, if the renewable energy boom is here to stay, and I think it is, we're going to be flooded with tens to hundreds of thousands of offshore wind turbines all over our seas, right? Now, these are harvesting an unlimited power source. It's not like oil and gas. The wind will always blow, right? Let's put these in the best places to capture wind forever. Okay, and then speaking of that, let's bring in some long-term thinking, goes beyond government timelines. We need 100-year scale, say. Got to have something to start off with. If those turbines are based in the best places to capture wind energy, we need to think carefully about the life cycle. You need to think about close ports. We need to think about construction, operation, all the decommissioning, and do that before they're built. Okay, it's too late for the turbines that are already out there, but for any new turbines that are coming in this boom, it's not too late. To capitalize on the natural benefits, and you're going to hear a lot about that over the next couple of days, ideal sites should also be sited where those biodiversity benefits can be maximized. Now, this will mean making the most of the artificial reef effect, enhanced connectivity, diversity in the food webs, and I think underwater components, they should be built to last, not removed and decommissioned every 30 years. This also needs to be done with regional scale approaches, not project by project, but working across regions. It's a lot more efficient. Nature inclusive design can be woven into all of this. It can be maximized. And again, there's some great examples of that. You'll hear a lot more about that. Also, interoperability and co-location with other industries. There are aquaculture opportunities. There are other opportunities that should be realized if we're really going to make this a permanent structure. Cable systems do need to be replaced, but we could relay in the same trenches over time, rather than letting stuff grow in it and then pulling that up again. The port infrastructure, you're going to hear a lot from our next speaker about ports This needs to be completely reconfigured and stabilized to support this permanent infrastructure. And the energy grid. We need to think about the large floating structures because you're going to need different types of turbine jackets and bases depending on where you are. And the floating structure is going to have to be brought inshore, to be serviced and built. These new ports could be construction centers for all the nature inclusive design stuff, for the cable servicing and so on. Developers and operators. Now, they're key, right? They're the people spearheading this, right? What if they rented the space on top of the turbines, right? If they rented the space on top of the bases to put their turbines. Now, for that to work, you need an agreement on the standard size of turbines. Now, there's currently it's like an arms race as to who can build the biggest nacelles, right? Now, about probably 20 to 25 megawatts is good. That's a 300-meter structure, 150-meter blades. Standardizing that cools the competition down, and it means that you can replace with the same types of turbines whenever they need to be replaced. The funding model, well, that's critically important. I'm not going to solve that, but I think this is a national infrastructure. This is as important as roads, highways. This needs to be a state-owned, state-managed thing. But if the license and rental costs is woven into the leases paid for by the developers, then this can go towards the environmental and the structural monitoring and the upkeep over time, and will help offset that initial risk, but also the liability for developers. There are lots of challenges with this. We need circular economies, fewer tariff wars, strong, reliable supply chains, suitable port facilities, new grid connections, and coming back to OSPAR, we need to upgrade a lot of our existing policies because they won't allow this currently, speaking from a North Sea perspective. Perhaps before all of this, we need to come back to a point I raised a few minutes ago, that what matters most to people is what shapes the agenda, and this is where the resources are directed. If we want to tackle climate change and the biodiversity crisis at the same time, and if we want policies and decisions to reflect our values, and if we want to work alongside natural systems, maximizing their benefits for us, we need to work together. We need to listen to one another. We need to truly understand what is valuable. There's only one biosphere, as we know. We're all in it. We're all connected, whether we like it or not. There's nothing more important than this. That's why meetings like this are really important. We share, we exchange ideas, we can start developing a roadmap for the future together. And in the meantime, it's really important that we go beyond and we get our findings out there. We communicate with decision makers, with politicians, managers. We need to get as much impact from our research as we can, so that our society is the best equipped to make the difficult decisions that lie ahead. And there's no better time to act than now. Thank you.
See if there are a couple of questions
Sure.
right now.
Okay. Any immediate thoughts or questions or views or yes, you over there.
Loved the presentation, and I'm so excited about these
And
topics.
who are you? Just
Oh,
introduce
yeah.
yourself.
I'm Shayna Snyder. I work at the National Wildlife Federation on our offshore wind team. And a question that I had was about one of the ideas you spoke about, where if we want to maximize the biodiversity benefits of nature inclusive design, putting turbines in areas where they're going to make the most impact. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts about whether or not there'll be conflict there between the mitigation hierarchy to avoid areas where we have the highest amounts of biodiversity that might also be most at risk, coupled with maximizing biodiversity benefits, and how we balance those two issues.
There's conflict everywhere with this, and it's because we've become somewhat, I mean, it's not everybody, but we've become somewhat entrenched in our way of living. And the different sectors have become used to functioning in the way that they always have. We once had the whale oil industry, which I believe operated, up and down this coast. And then we saw a gradual transition there. And then, over time, we transitioned to different types of energy. We then saw the oil and gas industry. And I mean, they were the heroes, you know, of the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. And then now we've seen changes there. And now we see offshore wind coming in. All along, you've had all the fishers who have always gone out there. There are always going to be conflicts here, I think. I think in your question, you were asking, so how do we manage that? Or how do we approach that? I think dialogue like this, but getting regulators in the room, getting the fishers in the room, getting everyone all together. And you don't just go through your calendar and your address book and bring everyone all together in the one go, because some people might fight, you know. You have to slowly bring people in. There's an awful lot of working behind the scenes. There's talking to different people in the right way, using the right language. I nearly put my foot in it with some fishers a few weeks ago, where I let some of my views slip, and I realized that just because I think that there needs to be sort of greater consideration of what we're doing in terms of how we fish our environment. These are people that have to make a living too, and this is you strip away all of our cleverness and all of our ideas. We're just people. We're all people trying to make our way in the world, and it's getting down to the most basic understanding of what our different needs are and the languages that we speak, and then you can start to look for common ground. Once you've got something in common, you can all rally around that. It then makes it easier to tackle the difficult bits. And we started this a lot in the UK, like the OSPAR thing is ongoing. We've been knocking on their door and working with them for now 3 years. They've stopped answering for now. But you shouldn't lose heart. You should keep at it. And if the idea is good, and this is genuinely good, I speak for myself. I think this makes sense. It ticks all the boxes, but we're dealing with different mindsets, and we need to get down and understand what those are, and slowly begin to work towards trying to find a common goal. And it might be different to what we can envisage. You also have to be willing to compromise. So I think dialogue, it's all the social things, dialogue, communication. Yeah.